On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Brian Berger. He's the Senior Director of Infrastructure Operations at Ping Identity. So very excited to have Brian on the episode. We're going to be talking about the transformation Ping Identity has been undergoing. He's done a bit of reorganization to the company. He's creating different pillars and various technologies, aligning SRE and operational teams. He's doing some really dynamic things that I'm excited to have him on to talk about. Brian, thanks for being on the podcast.
Amir, thank you for having me on Tech Track today. I'm really excited to be here. As you indicated, I joined Ping Identity in February of last year. But before we kind of go into the topic at hand, let's give you a little bit of an overview of Ping Identity. As you indicated, we're a leader in identity management solutions. We do help enterprises deliver secure and seamless experiences for their users and their customers, and we do that through digital identity management. Our customers really require that both their workforce as well as their users have a seamless authentication experience without sacrificing security. And this has really become important as companies really navigate the second year of managing largely remote workforces. We have over 2 billion identities worldwide that rely on our products. We cover over 2 billion identities worldwide. This includes over 60% of the Fortune 100 companies, 13 of the largest US banks, 7 of the largest global healthcare companies, and 5 of the largest aerospace companies. So we have a pretty big responsibility and we take that seriously. As I said, when I joined Ping in February of 2020 as Senior Director of Infrastructure Operations, I really inherited a really strong team of very talented software developers, SRE, configuration engineers. And this group is really accountable for keeping our services up reliably and ensuring our delivery pipelines that offer those services run smoothly. So pretty big responsibility with teams distributed around the globe.
Yeah, I'd imagine with the number of identities you guys cover and the sheer size of your Fortune 100 customers, definitely an undertaking. I know when we were talking, on a pre-call, we were talking about some of, what you were brought in to do, some of the transformation. And obviously, I always find it interesting when people join and then the pandemic hits because, you joined in February of 2020 and within 30 days, a lot of stuff starts shifting for everyone. But I guess take us back to when you were being hired and you must have had a plan in February thinking, I'm coming in, this is what I'm trying to achieve. What was the mindset? Like, did you have a firm plan in hand? Because obviously, my subsequent question is going to be is how much of that plan did you have to throw out the door and how much of that plan were you able to hold on to?
You always have an idea if you're going through a transparent interview process or a transparent hiring process. And Ping was very good about that. So I had a reasonable idea of what we were walking into. And really what we were walking into, or what I was walking into, was an organization. They were performing and they were delivering solid service. But you could tell in talking with the leadership in the organization and even, the frontline, just throughout the organization, they felt they could do better. And they were a little bit frustrated. And then they weren't quite sure how to go tackle it and how to tease it apart. You always come in with certain ideas, but I think to me, the smart thing is to come in with those ideas, share those with the leadership of the organization and get feedback and ensure that either the ideas you bring or through that feedback process, you develop what I would call an execution plan.
Absolutely. And I guess the follow-up to that question is, you obviously, laid out the plan, you were hired to the job. They obviously believe you could deliver on your vision. And you start, a month passes, 2 months pass, and all of a sudden, lots of dynamic shifting for every human, pretty much every human on Earth.
On Earth, absolutely.
Yeah, very rarely can we say everyone gets impacted by something, but in this case, what happens there for you? Are you going back and re-examining the plan and seeing, what modifications? Are you readdressing business needs? Because I know obviously transformation is part of what you were trying to achieve. Transformation needs some roadmap to occur.
This is probably one of the few instances where the shift caused by the pandemic, while it was, something worldwide, something that impacted everyone, the way the group itself functioned and the way we were structured didn't really impact our groups directly. We were already global. We already had to collaborate virtually. In a lot of our really remote areas, teams and team members were working from home to begin with. So in that sense, there wasn't a big mind shift in going around that. So while it sounds weird, that wasn't really our primary concern. Really, our primary concern was looking at the organization and really looking at how do we scale? How do we provide better service for our internal customers so that we can really keep that delivery velocity up and actually improve the delivery velocity? So, in that sense, we were able to really focus on the big things at hand. And that's really what we took this down to is really looking at how do we break down a very, very flat structure that served the organization well when it was small to how do we really segment those teams in a good way so that teams can focus. They can focus on technologies, they can focus on aligning with application teams and aligning with the business. We took a look at how we were making decisions and really looked at the centralized, really command decision process that was in place. Again, it worked well for the team and the organization when it was smaller, but that kind of take the decision, up to one or two people and have that decision made wasn't serving the team well. And so these were the things that we really felt we needed to take on and tackle so that we could, I would say, really scale the organization out, deal with this cognitive overload, build subject matter expertise in key technologies, and really align with the business teams, the application teams, and our product teams.
And when you mentioned kind of, adding to the subject matter expertise in specific areas, I mean, was part of the plan getting deeper and having more, I guess, niche groups to address things? Was it, more collaboration of sharing information? How would you go about, getting to that point?
A little of both. Part of the plan was to take predominantly our SRE team and let them work in groups. Prior to joining the organization, the SRE group was incredibly flat globally, and we were very project focused. So Project X came up, who was available to do it? That person was assigned to do it. You did it, you moved on to the next thing. And so it was, in some ways, it was like an assembly line. And again, when you're a small group, you can do that. But as you take on additional technologies, you need to build deeper subject matter expertise. You really need to shift from becoming project focused to becoming technology focused and services focused. So what we were able to do was just it was a very natural boundary to subdivide our SRE teams into regions. And then what we were able to do is align from a business perspective with the development teams closest in that region. And then we also took our technologies and assigned them to each of these SRE groups. These groups, once they were assigned a technology, were really responsible for kind of building out the deeper subject matter expertise, building enough knowledge, enough run books so that we could support, these technologies globally at a frontline perspective. But then you always had really this common design, this common best practices that you would build in that technology to continue to support it, promote it, whether it's how to scale it, how to deploy it, how to observe that technology, or how to monitor that technology.
Interesting. I guess as you're kind of going through and, realigning the team, subdividing based on region, assigning a technology, when you're looking at the actual team makeup, and obviously it was pretty flat, was there a delta for people to kind of move into this new paradigm? Obviously, specializing in technology. I mean, obviously you guys were global already, so regions maybe less of a concern.
There was a delta. Some of the technologies that would be assigned into a team, the team, at least initially, didn't have perhaps as deep of an expertise we wanted them to have. But as they were living that technology day in and day out, they quickly acquired that expertise. With each of these teams, we made sure that we brought in or assigned a principal SRE to that team, whether they were within that same region or not, to help also provide guidance and accelerate that knowledge process.
Interesting. I guess when you're looking at, the alignment of, and I think you mentioned on a pre-call for the follow the sun model. So you have the subdivision, by regions, and obviously that helps, the local support. And then obviously by technology, each group has a certain area they're competent in. How does the actual SRE teams kind of coordinate with each other to pull in the right resource to make sure, obviously, if there's a, technical gap in or technical need that they might not have in that particular area?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because one of the things you do have to be on the lookout for when you go to this type of model is that you don't build deep silos. You still have to share that knowledge across all the teams, all the regions. We do this a couple of ways. We have a few key hours during the day when we have most of our SRE groups online. So we do a lot of, used to be called virtual, lunch and learns and such to share that knowledge. We do a monthly all hands where we'll spotlight something. Each team, as part of being responsible for their technologies, will develop run books for that basic care and feeding for that first line triage and troubleshooting. Each team will also have an SRE on call, so they'll rotate through on call. So if a particular event is going on with the technology and that primary region isn't online, there is always kind of the first and second line of troubleshooting that can be done by any SRE, but then they can quickly escalate to their on call counterpart in an alternate region and actually bring them in. And it's something that served us very well. We've been able to do a couple of things. Obviously, we can do quicker troubleshooting this way. But the other thing that we've been able to do is now that we've coalesced into these teams, if you're familiar with kind of the 5 phases of team building, this forming, storming, norming, and such, before we were very seldom getting out of this storming phase where everybody's trying to get used to each other and do these different things. We've now really gotten very comfortable in this norming and performing phase where, as you work with a team a lot, you can almost get to where you're finishing each other's sentence. And we've really gotten to that stage, and it's really exciting to see how the teams have been able to perform, the level of service that they've been able to reach. It's just been an amazing process.
I mean, it sounds like a pretty dynamic shift, and also, the teams are probably embracing their core competency. When you're looking at this model, has this alleviated any hiring constraints? Obviously, when you're flatter, hiring must have been a certain way. Obviously, now, if you're hiring for a certain team, it seemingly seems like it'd be a easier skill set to look for.
It helps us focus our skill sets. I would certainly say that. So that's certainly helped. As it's helped our throughput, we're able to actually get more done without pushing more hours.
Hmm.
And so when you start looking at effort versus, an FTE or versus a position or person, it's helped on that front as well. And it's also resulted in generally more confidence within the SRE teams and a higher degree of job satisfaction.
Hmm. Interesting. So obviously, a pretty big uplift. How long did the transformation itself take? It might be ongoing as well, but I guess the initial redividing the teams and assigning them by the core technologies, was that a couple of days, weeks, months?
Like you said, it's an ongoing, it's really a journey more than a destination.
There you go.
I would say that to really, I think, get the groundwork of the plan in place probably took about 60 days. And part of that was me talking to the other leadership, talking to individuals to make sure that we were doing the right thing and that we all understood the problems we were trying to solve and that we all understood that this was a journey. This was not something that you're immediately going to see an improvement in a week. This was most likely going to be a journey where it's 3 steps forward and a step or two back, and you understand why you took that step or two back, and then you keep moving forward. I would say it probably took us about 4 to 6 months before the majority of the organization would look and say, yes, I get it. I understand what we're doing, and we're driving to the right things.
Interesting. You mentioned obviously taking steps forward or back. Is there anything you look back and it stands out as a major lesson learned from kind of the experience of reorganizing, re-engineering the makeup of the SRE team?
Oh, man, that's a fantastic question. And I'm not sure if I have a clear answer on that or not. Obviously, I would have liked to have gone faster,
Hmm.
but I'm not sure what you would do on that front and how you would make it go faster because part of this is the organization itself needs to have buy-in, it needs to understand it. And that's a process that takes time.
And I agree. I think looking back at something what you described, I think it'd be very difficult. I mean, time is always what you're going to want to accelerate, but also I think you have to balance that with not missing stuff and getting sloppy, obviously. But when you go back to the buy-in, and obviously you were brought in, you're reorganizing, you're realigning across different organizations and people. What were those conversations like? Who were they with? I guess, you were a director of infrastructure here. So I guess I'm assuming other leadership, but specifically, who did you have to pull in to make this type of thing happen?
I had a really good support from our engineering leadership. So that was really more along the lines of explaining to them what we wanted to do, why we wanted to do it, and what we expected out of it. There was always questions along the way with my peers. Okay, what are we trying to do again? How are we going to do it? And some of the alignments we got right early on. Others, it took an iteration or two to where perhaps we didn't have the right team aligned with the right application team. But that to me is part of an agile process where you propose what you want to do, you describe your outcome, you measure your outcome, and then you pivot or change based on the direction you need to go.
Pretty incredible. Yeah, you mentioned 4 to 6 months, 60 days to get a plan out, 4 to 6 months. It's ongoing, but it sounds, I mean, you guys are a bigger company. It sounds pretty ambitious. In terms of as you're now looking in the future, it's an ongoing plan. Is there a subsequent phase that you're looking at rolling out to kind of, getting deeper in certain areas?
Well, I think we'll constantly evaluate how we're structured. An organization is a living and breathing entity. And so you always want to make sure you're aligned and doing the right things for the right reasons. So, in that sense, we'll continue to evaluate. We'll probably look and take some of our senior leadership, some of our senior technical leadership, and move them closer into the regions and align that way. We're always looking at and partnering with our application teams on, what's coming next on the technology front to make sure that we're prepared. So I can see us doing deeper dives in those areas as well.
Awesome. I'm starting to ask, depending on the background, because I'm always a little bit curious, and people ask me this question. I'm going to ask you, see what your thoughts are. But obviously, at a senior director level, you're not as hands-on probably as you'd like to be, just because you have other stuff to do. How do you keep yourself kind of abreast of current, trends, technologies? I mean, obviously, I know you have a team, but is there anything you specifically do yourself to kind of help you kind of stay up to par?
Hire smart people and talk to smart people, I think would be probably the best way that I do this. Ask a lot of questions. Application teams and things will bring certain technologies into us. And so I think it's just kind of natural day to day. From there, Google searches are your friend. Looking into other opportunities and such, going and finding out, your technical colleagues, who's doing what and what are they doing well, and learn from them.
Absolutely. I think the Google rabbit hole is sometimes the best form of education because you
Yes.
you ask Google one thing, and all of a sudden, 85 links later, you discover that what you were looking for had really no relevancy. You should be actually learning about something else, and you're
Yes.
like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. But it's fantastic. No, that's awesome. I like it. What's funny is I get a lot of leaders say hiring smart people is the best way they stay current, which is interesting because I think a lot of people ask me to ask that question, and they're thinking there's a secret sauce of they want to hear. I attend conferences. Well, I virtually attend conferences now, and I read and all that stuff. And I think it's interesting that multiple people are saying, hiring the smartest staff you can is the best way to actually stay current because they are bringing in the new ideas that they're having to tactically deal with day to day, and kind of bubbles it up to you and lets you kind of Google what you got to Google.
Yeah, and you actually touched on another topic that we haven't really hit on, but was another core part of what we've shifted, which is really our decision making process. We were very centralized in how we made decisions, how we got approval. And teams were used to asking for permission. And there's this great concept really pushed by David Marquette called intent based leadership. And it's something that we adopted, and it's worked really well for us. And the whole concept behind this is to really talk about the framework and the boundaries and how to think about and make a decision and push that decision as close to the information as possible, and then communicate intent and escalate things that fall outside of that framework. And that has been an incredibly powerful tool for our teams, our groups to take ownership, to move quickly and not wait from a decision from a manager or senior manager, but more communicate the intent of what they're going to do.
Very cool. I love that. I'm going to make sure we include intent based leadership by David Marquette in our show notes so that somebody can go Google that and go down that rabbit hole and hopefully learn something.
It's some really entertaining content and some fantastic content.
Awesome, Brian. Thank you for being on and sharing. I think it's been awesome to have you speak to us. And if somebody has a question they want to follow up, where should they reach out? LinkedIn, good, or what's your preferred medium for somebody to reach out?
LinkedIn is the best place and the place that I really use. So I would say find me on LinkedIn and ask me a question, reach out to me. I'd love to have the conversation and continue the conversation.
Awesome. We'll make sure we include your LinkedIn on the show notes. And again, thank you for being on. That's it for this episode of the podcast. We'll be back again, different guest, different topic. I always ask for two things. One is the subscriptions to the podcast have been doing amazingly well. So Thank you for listening and sharing the podcast. It's always interesting when somebody says, somebody told me to listen to the podcast, and I kind of still pinch myself and I go, wow, that's pretty cool that happens. And secondly, topics that you guys want me to cover, I'm always open to it. If it's outside of even the range of podcasts we put out, happy to see if I can find somebody to speak to it, always trying to provide value. Until next time, thanks.